Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's In a Talent Informational. Today we have a STEM-based guest lecture from Rachit Kataria, who will be talking about end-to-end design and design thinking. He is an Indian techie from the Bay who loves many different things, such as reading self-help books and eating Japanese food, as well as longboarding. Aside from that, he's also had multiple software internships with startups and tech giants across the country, all the way from Mountain View to New York. He's primarily ventured into front-end and back-end mobile development and machine learning. And he's also sharing with us his expertise in computer science as through his bachelor's in science and master's of science in computer science from USC, and also his work experience from Facebook on e-commerce. With all that said, I would now like to pass it over to Rachit.
Awesome. Hey everyone, nice to see everyone in the call. So yeah, welcome everyone. Thanks so much for joining. Really happy to see you all here. And like I introduced, there's this topic on end-to-end thinking for design, and how do we kind of go through that entire flow. So first of all, thanks so much for the intro. Really appreciate it. And yeah, let's just jump right in. So design thinking and end-to-end design. Quick intro. I think you already gave it. Maybe just like a more visual representation of what's been going on here. I am Rachit, or Ratchet, your preference. I actually went to school at Lynbrook, so if anyone of you are currently there, I'm a former alum, or current alum, so always nice to see everyone. I also went to USC for my undergrad and master's, and I also have done a bit of internships across the breadth of startups and bigger companies, so Facebook, Apple, Blend, Kleiner Perkins, and Shape are some of the options there that I've explored. And yeah, I've learned a lot about just how teams execute on products and how they use design to inform their decisions. And that we're actually building useful products for the people that we're targeting, our core user base. So let's actually jump into what design thinking is. And it's both an ideology and a process. And it's concerned with solving these wicked problems, as we call them, in a user-centric way. So the core things you want to take away here are that it's user-centric and it solves wicked problems. And what I mean by wicked is complex. So a wicked versus tame problem, you think of tame problem as, 5 of your friends are coming over for dinner and you're going to cook food for all of them. All of a sudden, another 5 of them decide to show up and they want to hang out with you. A very tame problem and solution is, how do I give them food? You just double your ingredients and then you cook more food. A wicked problem is something like solving climate change or homelessness or poverty. It's very complex. It's not easy to solve. And this also spills into the problems that you have at work. How do you make sure that your users are actually in a position where whenever they have problems that come to your app or your website, you can solve them? It could be as simple as the login flow. It could be as complex as finding food at the right time in the right place and finding your location, a lot of moving factors. So that's kind of what design thinking revolves around. And this is actually not a very novel concept. This came out decades ago, but in 1978 around IDEO, which is a very famous design firm, brought it into the mainstream as a very common way of thinking about problems. So that's design thinking. Let's talk a little bit about the phases of design thinking. So if you look at this is also in the previous slide, we have this flow of empathizing, defining, ideating, prototyping, and testing. And if you kind of look at this graph right here, we can start off with empathy, which is getting to know your user, their needs, their objectives. You have defining, which is understanding their barriers, what's stopping them from solving their problems, or kind of like framing things in terms of their shoe, what it would be like to be in their shoes. Then there's the ideating, which is actually thinking about the solutions. And here, the goal is to be as creative and non-judgmental as possible. Don't assume anything, just come up with whatever idea you have and go off of your research. And then prototyping, which actually I heard, I think all of you are gonna be, or at least on the STEM side, you're focusing on this right now. So you've done a little bit of research, the empathizing, some defining. Now you're on the stage where you're trying to build an actual product, and that should be tangible, it should be useful. And then it leads you to testing, which is how do we actually make sure that people can use this well. One thing you'll notice about this graph is that it looks linear in the middle, but actually jumps around a few places. And that's because a lot of design thinking focuses around this constant reiteration and revisiting your initial assumptions or what you kind of went in with. So for example, after prototyping, maybe it didn't work out and you have to go back to the drawing board. So you ideate. When you're empathizing, maybe you just figure out the problems there and then, but maybe it's such a strong signal you can jump directly to the prototype and then kind of keep going in circles as you will until you find the most refined solution that works for you. So this is kind of like a high level breakdown of what all those stages look like. And here's some guiding principles that you should think about as you're going through these phases. For one, there's a human role, which is that everything is social. We're all humans. We're all trying to understand other humans to solve problems for them. So keep that in mind that this is a very social activity. Two is that there's ambiguity. Whether you're building, a volunteer portal, whether you're building a massive feature for another company, there's always going to be a right or a wrong, and you don't really know which that is. And you won't know until you experiment and find that out. So things are going to be ambiguous. All design is redesign. There's some underlying patterns about human behavior that you can find across a lot of different features, different products, and it's your job to find out how you can target those best for your users. So you're kind of just redesigning for them. And then finally, tangibility. You're currently on the prototype stage, so your job right now is to make things tangible, to put things in users' hands, so you have actionable feedback because they're actually interacting with the experience that you've built for them. So these are the main kind of guiding ideologies behind what we're doing. And you can even actually see this in a very basic case study. So one thing I just want to point out is there's an example of this eye hospital, Rotterdam, where they had a problem when people just didn't really want to come to the hospital. They had very low retention and they weren't really sure what to do. And a group of designers came in and decided to tackle this with design thinking. And they started off with patient first. So that hits the empathy side, understanding what the patient is going through. And they found that most people were afraid of actually going blind while they were there. Whether it was a concern of the operation, whether it was a concern of just maybe it felt inevitable and being at the hospital made it feel more real, they didn't want to be at the hospital. And this especially applied to children. So what they did is they took this entire flow of empathizing and iterating, and they found solutions that would work inside and outside the hospital. So they looked at cases where a grocery store reduced wait times and made it a lot easier to kind of sit around while you're waiting for results. They looked at other hospitals to see how they approach problems. And one of the things they found was that, especially for children, if they could make them feel less afraid by the environment, they could get a lot more people to stay. So they did things like very basic experiments. T-shirts with animal prints. You say your favorite animal is a penguin, they'll give you a t-shirt with a penguin on it. They'll have an eye care air training program where the doctors will actually spend the time understanding how to talk to someone who might be afraid. Or like redesigning the children's department to look something like this, where it's a little more playful and it's not as scary for them. And their patient intake went up 47%, almost half, just by doing very simple experiments, understanding why people were worried, and then going and iterating on that, as opposed to just thinking of a solution and deciding to go and see if it works or not. So there's this case study, but why we're talking about this today at all and why it relates to what you're working on is that you're actually already doing it. You've been doing the empathizing, you've been doing the research, you're already in the prototyping stage. This is just a framework to understand a way to kind of put that into one whole flow. And there's a lot of benefits too. So some of the examples are there's a focus on root cause, cost savings, time to market, customer loyalty, happier users. There's many different options here of like why you can benefit from design thinking. But the main ones I think are these three that people focus on. It reduces the time to market because you're spending so much more time focusing on what the user wants as opposed to just seeing what sticks, that you find the problem very quickly, early on. And then you just iterate with them. You have a very closed feedback loop of knowing what they have and whether it's going well or not. And it just makes going to your final solution a lot faster. There's kind of cost savings and return of investment. Cost savings depends if you're building a company, but generally the time spent and how likely people are to keep coming back. So in the case of IBM, which is another very large tech company that employs this, they actually estimate about a 300% return on any project they do with design thinking. So a 3x gain of just thinking about it in terms of this framework. And then innovative solutions. Like we talked about in the ideation stage, you should never feel like you're constraining your craziest ideas. It should always be out of the box and just no judgments, no assumptions. And then think about what you can come up with and see if that sticks. But sticks in terms of whether the user is okay with it or not, and always checking in with them. So these are kind of the benefits and why we're even thinking about this today and why a lot of companies actually use this today. So we talked about this flow, right? The empathizing, defining, ideating, prototyping, testing. And I think we're actually, from what I've heard, you're all in this defining to prototyping phase where you're still figuring out the overall frameworks of what you want to build, in this case, a volunteer portal, and whether or not you're actually building the right things. That's almost as important as building it well. It's not enough to just build a software, it should be tackling problems that exist. So as part of this, I want to run a quick kind of fun exercise, and it's called How Might We? And it's something that Stanford Design School actually came up with. And the idea is you come up with a challenge, like a problem and a point of view, and you try to think about just ways you can frame questions so you know the right things you're tackling. So here's a very basic example. The challenge is, how can you make airports better? You know, everyone, there's some part of flying you don't like. It's always busy. It's always too much waiting. A lot of people crying in the plane. There's problems there. And the point of view could be a mother of three who's just rushing around. She has to make it to her flight. Her kids are worried. It's a very busy time. And how Stanford might say, think about this is amp up the good. So what if we use the kids' energy to entertain passengers? Maybe removing the bad. How do we get kids away from the other passengers? Maybe even something like question assumptions. Why is waiting even necessary at an airport? Is there a better way around all of this? And it's all phrased in a how might we, such that we are all thinking about the problems that we want to solve. Because again, that is just as important as actually solving the problem, because we want to make sure it's the right problem to solve. So these are some examples. This is a very kind of like a case you might expect. And I want you to try for maybe just 3 or 4 minutes to think about your own how might we's. So the challenge is going to be pretty similar. Imagine redesigning the shopping experience at your grocery store, where the POV is a tired father or mother. I'm sure all of your parents actually probably feel this all the time, that they have to pick up groceries after a long day of work. They picked up their kids from school or a daycare, and now they just have to get groceries. And there's a lot of problems in this flow too. So I want you to think about the how might we blank to solve their problems. And you can think about it in terms of amping the good, exploring the opposites, thinking about the adjectives, but maybe just spend 3 or 4 minutes either writing it down, typing it up on your laptop, to come up with at least 1 or 2 how might we phrases. And to even maybe give some examples for inspiration, you can think about what is the bad here, where they're really tired, for example. Maybe we can remove some of their physical fatigue or mental fatigue while they're there. So how might we remove the need to walk around the entire store? And the crazy response to that ideating could be, let's give everyone electric scooters to zoom around inside the shop and really make it more fun for them. But that's an example of a how might we, and that can spur any number of ideas. But that's one example for inspiration. And if I were to jump back to, I can even just give a little more reference. The other two, for example, going after adjectives. They talk about someone who's rushing or harried or tired or fatigued. How can we change that feeling for them? So how might we, in this case, change tired to, maybe to less focused on work, or tired to invigorated? Something that can get them a little more excited about being at that store. What do you all think? What are some how might we questions?
How might we make a grocery trip actually enjoyable for the kids?
Yeah, how might we make a grocery trip enjoyable for kids? So you're empathizing with the kids, definitely.
I'm all about the free samples. So the more free samples, the better, right? Try new
Yeah.
things.
Yeah. That could be like a amp up the good. How about we add food as part of the grocery trip experience?
Yeah. New tastes.
Yeah, food tastings.
All right. Remove the need to go to the grocery store at all.
Yeah, that's definitely one. That could be questioning an assumption, like why do we have to go to a store? How about we remove going to the store entirely?
How might we make the food easier to find?
How might we make it easier to find? So that's kind of the bad part, which is it's harder to window shop and understand where things are.
How about doing some like simple things as like pick, drive through?
Okay.
Like a drive through with some articles that you're just like salad pickup, put it all in your car, and then at the end just check out yourself.
Yeah. How might we?
How might we streamline the grocery process? Right? Is that kind of what you're saying?
I'm saying like simple things that are just packaged food, just have it as a drive-through.
Yeah, so this is like you're actually, it almost sounds like coming up with the ideation stage, which is the solutions to the streamlining, which makes a lot of sense, like a drive-through or a self-checkout. So you can see,
Okay, sorry.
no, this is a great
Actually,
example of how like, these questions will spur the brainstorm.
could I say how might we convince Amazon to open an Amazon Go location?
Yeah, how we convince stores to open new locations for shopping. So this is kind of hitting the like convenience point. How can we get more stores in the area? Cool. So hopefully this is just it's like meant to be a very simple exercise. The whole point is these are the types of questions that really get you brainstorming, because as you can see, like Hope and Auntie just came up with ideas off of those questions. It's a very good way to just set a framework for, I feel like I'm the user now. I feel like I just walked into a store and I want to be food easier to find. I want food tastings, feelings like that. So that's kind of the goal of these types of questions. Cool, let's jump back into the presentation. Thanks everyone for giving your suggestions. Awesome, so as part of this, you'll notice there's this idea of like a user moving through things. And this is actually a real concept. It's called user journeys. This is something that's used in a lot of design thinking, where it's basically just a timeline of the user's experience or their interaction while they're going through some flow. In our case, it was a shopping mall or a grocery store and they're walking through it, but it could be anything. It could be a volunteer portal where they have to go through a login flow. They have to go through a flow to understand what are their hours, where are they going next. It's basically just a full journey. And the best ones are backed by research and feedback. So this always ties back to the empathy stage. If there's anything you take away from this, it's that it's only worth actually solving problems that are worth solving, if that makes sense. You don't really want to be tackling things that don't have, that aren't like a real problem out in the wild. It's actually worth knowing why a user cares about something to then decide to go build and take your hours to make a final product end of the day. And I know you're all focusing on test cases right now too. So this is all baked into the design thinking process. You should always be thinking about, as part of the user journey, where are they going next? What could they possibly run into that would be a problem? And how can we make sure that's always addressed? So this is the concept of a user journey. And here's a very, very simple example. A consumer is hungry and downloads a new food delivery app. So they log into the food app for the first time. They're feeling super overwhelmed. There's too many options. They don't know what to buy. And then a tooltip just pops up saying, hey, here's some filters to search by location, search by cuisine, very simplified. And then they can place their first order through the app. So this is an example of if you or me sat down and downloaded a new app and just needed to understand from A to B, I now have an app and I want to get food. What happens in between? So this is an example of a user journey. But if you kind of scale out a little bit, here's a really good template to think about how users are going through their journey. They have phases. They have the steps within each phase. They have a goal for that step, and they have pain points. And pain points are really what you want to hit. These are the problems you might run into that you want to address. They're kind of your test cases in what you're building. So I'm going to give you a quick example, actually. Does this look familiar to you? I hope it does. This is the In Italian homepage. And you'll notice, we have our home, internship, summer classes, and a login button. So let's say someone's trying to log in, right? Imagine the phase, step, goal, and pain points they have. Their phase is like, I want to get started. I want to jump into InnoTalent. Their steps are, I want to click login, and maybe I need to sign up for an account too. Their goal is accessing their account information, or maybe just making a new account and getting started with the organization. The pain point is they forgot their email or their password, or if you go to the website, there's only Facebook and Google. Maybe the email option didn't exist. They could be a little worried about sharing that information. They don't trust using that on their website. So you want to be cautious of that and then address it appropriately. So user journey in this structure really gives you a good idea of someone just jumping in and what exactly they're doing in your product that you want to catch and you want to give a solution for. So this is just a very simple example. It's a login flow. So this kind of gives you a perspective of using that template. And I want to do another quick exercise together. This is more up to you, actually. So I know you've all been prototyping on the STEM side and you're trying to get to build something out on the volunteer portal. So what I want you to do is, with a similar flow like this, I would love it if you can just think of your favorite feature you want to build, like you would love to see it on the volunteer portal, and think about if you are the user that was jumping in to use that feature, what type of phases, steps, goals, and pain points you might hit trying to go through that. So login is a very simple example. Maybe there's something about, checking your volunteer hours, and what does it actually look like to check those hours? What does it look like to know when your next volunteering event is going to be? So things like that, where you're building something for someone else. You might very well be that volunteer. How would you think about using your feature?
So basically, sorry, once you click the login button, you can sign up for an account if you're new. And then once you sign up for an account, you can either use Facebook or Google, or you can also use your own email, which is why that one is solved. And then there's also like a selection button thing that allows you to click like forgot password if you forget it, or email, and that's why that one's also solved. And that's why yeah, that's kind of it. And then
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. So I like how you're addressing the existing solutions for the pain points. So I mean, it sounds great if those are already getting resolved. I would love to. I mean, this can be a follow-up for you to think about later too. If there are any other new pain points that might arise with a different login flow, or if there's a new type of logging in they would expect, or even something as simple as you go to the website today and you want to sign up. You don't want to log in, but the only thing you see is login. So maybe the first thing you want to see is I'm a new user. Where do I go? And that might not be as obvious. So different expectations of the user could come under the goals, for example. Maybe the goal is signing up, but they don't see a clear way to do that. So things to think about as part of the flow.
You could also have forgotten your login as well. Which login did you use? Was it a nickname or an email or?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so for the phases, I was thinking of like finding out your what volunteer events are coming up. And then some steps could be like, first, like the user would have to look for the volunteer button, and then you would select the date range and type of volunteering event. And then like the main goal is just being able to determine what events are coming up.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I guess one of the pain points is the user not knowing what events are coming up. And so like they don't know what they can do and what they're interested in. So that's what I think of this.
Yeah, I think that pain point of what they want to do or not do could actually come in. So this structure gives you a way to know maybe what a solution for that could look like. So like you said, the pain point is they don't know what they want to do. They just see a list of volunteering events. Maybe you could add something as simple as a tag that says what the type of the event is. Is it computer help? Is it teaching? Is it cooking? Things that actually give people more interest and they're more likely to want to choose something.
How about if we can tie the efforts of volunteering to the impact it causes? So for example, if I am a volunteer, I'm thinking, okay, I want to know what impact I'm causing, what kind of, where I'm improving the lives, where I'm moving the needle. So depending on the type of volunteering activity, what's the impact I'm causing in the other people's lives or the organizations or whatever. So if there's a feature in the system which says, okay, these types of activities, there's some way of quantifying, impact, and then I can, so my phase would be I go and I monitor my impact, and my steps would be I look into the different categories, and maybe I want to maybe there are some passions that I have. I want to do something for certain categories of people or whatever, or groups. So I can focus my volunteering efforts on those kind of things. And, I don't know if that's just an idea.
No, that's awesome. I think that's a great new feature too to even throw on the roadmap of as part of like the passions, and are people feeling like after they've done the volunteering event, what is their feeling of, are they identified doing it? Do they feel like they did make a difference, or was it just wasted for them? Hopefully they never feel like that. So yeah, that's a great example.
I guess another feature, we could always like differentiate between the user and the admin, or the interns and the volunteers and the admin. So we're just gonna have different logins for different people. Well, I mean, we might not have to make an intern, just a volunteer. So and based on that, we would shape different profiles, I guess.
Cool. So maybe that kind of like hooks into the login flow as part of the steps. We'd probably throw in like a are you an admin, or maybe it's already done behind the scenes for you.
Okay.
So how about how about something like as a guest, uh, in case like you don't give everything that's in the volunteer portal, but a guest gets a good preview of what are the events that we support, or where volunteers go before they even go to the trouble of logging in and signing up. Uh, Maybe that's like something they can as an exploratory. Like if somebody's just trying to look at, oh, what do you guys do? What kind of events are volunteer doing? Would that
Yeah.
be a good thing to?
I think
Yeah.
that's actually a really good example of a pain point where maybe it's too much extra work for them to feel like they need to commit with their own personal information, and they just want to know what this organization's about. And you still want to show them those basic calendars and resources as a guest.
Yeah.
Awesome, great ideating, everyone. That was a really good breakdowns, and I hope you can see how you can get into the shoes of the users by thinking of a template like this. So yeah, really awesome to hear everyone's thoughts. And let me just give you some closing thoughts. Those are the main things I really wanted to highlight of design thinking focuses on. It's this framework that really focuses on these solutions for user-centric, for users, that focus on the user first and foremost. And it focuses on complex problems, these wicked problems that are not as simple as just coming up with a basic, let me add more ingredients and call it a day. It also focuses on building empathy and user research. So at any point in the stage, you should never feel like I've done enough research, I'm done, let me go build. You should always feel like there's going to be a real user at the end of this. So you want to make sure, no matter what the tip is, you bring it back to that person, you ask them to test it, you get their feedback, and you know if you're on the right track or the wrong track. And that's what makes it so efficient, because you can always know that you're doing something right or doing something wrong. And you can apply this anywhere. If you feel like you're working on something by yourself, you can always ask your friends whenever you feel like you need some advice. It's like we always do this anyway, and that's a form of design thinking too. Where you're building something, you always want that advice, or you want somebody else's input who might also be affected by what you're working on. And this is actually a great diagram from IDEO, a design firm I was talking about, where they try to frame things in terms of desirability, feasibility, and viability. So desirability is how much do people actually want to do this? That's the empathy side. Feasibility is based on what's already built. Can we add on to this and add this new feature? So like Kopnati's recommendation, we already have login. How hard is it to add a guest login? And kind of, can we do that with our existing structure? And then viability is, does it actually increase retention? Do more people want to come to the site and keep using it? Are they more excited to join in a talent? And design thinking really just goes through all those and iterates until you get to that sweet spot in the middle, where you find something that people really want to use. And that's kind of the goal of this entire framework. So you can apply it to anything, but as you're working on this new project, I hope it's applicable and you can think about it as you're building out things. Cool. So that was it on my end. Wanted to leave some time for Q&A or anything I covered, or anything in kind of my previous experiences as a high schooler in college, as a professional in the workplace. Yeah, happy to answer any questions.
What's your favorite part of the design thinking process?
Ooh, good question. I feel like for me, and I feel like we see this in the workplace too, I feel like the prototyping stage and kind of the iteration stage is a lot of fun, because once you've done a good amount of initial work and you know that this is something worth building, then you can start moving really quickly on just very basic, some mock-up of something you want to build, like a website. And actually, I'd gone to a design thinking session where the most basic prototype was literally the person just drew a website on a piece of paper and asked people to just point things out that they would use. And then you immediately know that doing any coding, any work whatsoever, what you need to build. And then you can save your own valuable time building out the right things. So I think there's a lot of creative ways you can get with prototyping that doesn't necessarily involve sitting down, understanding how to code this crazy new feature to get to the right answer.
Okay, I got a question. So what would your alternative career choice have been?
Alternative career choice. I think probably, I was considering medicine for a long time, actually. All of high school, I wanted to be pre-med. And then I switched to CS in college when I got there, just to try things out for a semester. And I realized how much I enjoyed it because there's so much logical application every step of the way. And like, you're sitting down for an hour and you stand up and something new that didn't exist before now exists, which is pretty cool. But I really enjoy med, and I think the impact you can have there as well. And I just love bio, like knowing how the world works. Like, there's trees outside and they have these alternations of generations, like random stuff you learn in bio that is pretty useless to your day to day, but it's really interesting to know how it works. So probably something down that route.
So this is kind of an unrelated question to the design thinking process, but just kind of a general question. So if you could change something that you did in high school, what would it be? Like, I know you talked a little bit about you were interested in pre-med, but like other than that, there's a specific experience or something like that.
Yeah. Things that are changing in high school. I feel like one thing, even in college that I realized you could do more of, I saw via hackathons. Like there's so many opportunities where you literally can just take a weekend, sit down for 24 hours, 36 hours, just commit to something and do it. And that could be as simple as like, people are already getting, they get super impressed. You say, I've read 2 books this month. When in reality, that's just 2 Saturdays and your entire 30-day month gone. And this concept of committing to something and just pushing through it because you really enjoy it is something that you can even start in high school. That says like, you want to code something, if there's too much information, I have other things to do. Just setting aside those blocks of time to sit down and just figure something out just for yourself for fun, with no one asking you to like get it done or not, and no holding yourself accountable either, just wanting to do it. That's a lot of fun. I think hackathons like in college too is a great way of seeing that, where like out of 36 hours, you just come up with a pretty fully fledged prototype, like to the point where you can interact with it in code. You're pitching it to people, you're selling them on these grand visions. You can win prizes for that. So there's a lot of, I think, there's a lot of power in just seeing how much you can do in a short period of time, as long as you put those hours aside for yourself. I think doing more of that in high school would have been produce more.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I actually had 2 questions, if you don't mind.
Sure.
The first one is more like, design related. I was just wondering, how do you exactly know and like test when the design you make is like effective?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think a lot of times it depends on what you're building. So for example, in the case of like social media, right, there's some metrics that can be used like likes, comments, engagement. And so there's cases where you want to see if people are actually increasing those metrics or decreasing them. That's a very analytical way. Even a more simple way is just seeing how long somebody is using what you're building. Do they want to keep using it? Do they lose interest quickly? In the case of like the example of somebody just drawing on a piece of paper, maybe they just look at it and they don't even know what to do. They're so overwhelmed with all the options. And then you show up with a different simple piece of paper. And now they're actually engaged in what they're seeing. They know that these buttons mean I can see this content or this content. So I think there's simple ways to just see that people are interested. And then there's more complex ways where if you're looking for a very specific increase, like I want X amount of like views on this page, or I want these many clicks on this button, then you can get more into that. But earlier on, you're really just making sure that people are willing to interact with your content as much as possible.
Okay, and then the second question was, so you basically mentioned how you were kind of interested in like biology pre-med stuff. So why did you exactly want to go into, this field and like this job career?
Into coding in particular?
Yeah.
Yeah, great question. I was definitely split between it when I was earlier in high school. I think they were just both really interesting to me. Like I enjoyed coding, and it felt pretty fun to kind of just be building things on the spot. I even did like a fun gaming course over the summer where I just made this ping pong game in Python, where you can have these paddles moving around, and just the fact that you could literally build a game and entertain yourself if you wanted to felt like it was just a cool skill to be able to do. Also, as you see like tech using across the world in every place, even if I were into pre-med, I'm sure tech would insert itself somewhere. So that was always interesting to me. And so I think when I was actually choosing, I realized that there was a bit of a difference between liking bio as your, okay, I like how trees evolve, I like how the world has gone where it is, and actually being a doctor day to day and working with people and making sure you understand all the material to the fullest extent and having that much empathy for people to be doing that day in, day out. And so that, I think because that was different enough as liking bio, I wanted to give CS a try because I had a little more, hands-on knowledge there versus a bio class to being a doctor. And I just found within my first year that I attended hackathons, I met these amazing people. There's just so much you could build in such a short period of time that it showed me that there was a lot that you could do with not too much time invested. And I think that feeling of that I could apply that anywhere was pretty rewarding. And so I decided to keep going, and here I am today talking to you.
Yeah.
So what were some of the challenges or challenging people, I guess, that you had to work with? And how did you deal with or resolve those situations?
Yeah, challenging people and results of situations. Is this in the like context of a workplace, or like what is one challenging time that you faced, like an interview question?
I guess so, yeah, workplace.
Sure, yeah. I mean, workplace, I think if anything, the challenges, you'll find this actually, is that design and engineering is a very interesting balance where you see if something's feasible versus what something is best designed for. So this actually comes into what I was talking about earlier, where I can even I can jump back to that diagram here. There's desirability, and maybe a designer does all this research and finds this amazing thing. And then there's the feasibility, which is given what we currently have, can we even build this? And sometimes it's very difficult to balance the two because a designer knows that this might be the best thing, but an engineer realizes that we can't build this in the next 2 months. It might take a year if it's really complicated. And then you kind of find that balance where you realize that something it's worth trading off because it doesn't take away nearly as much from the experience, but you can do it in a short amount of time. So that's an example where if designers are not really budging, then you kind of have to take on that old design thinking approach of balancing between these three and doing your best to deliver while making sure that it's actually doable. Because again, like a problem is worth solving, yes, and it should be solved, but how long it takes to solve, how you're going to solve it, who's going to solve it, those are also things you have to worry about.
And then also, what are some of your favorite designs that you've either made or seen that you think work like really cohesively or intuitively?
Yeah, favorite designs. That's a good question. There's so many. I feel like Mac is such a basic example. Super easy to use, like a design of an operating system, very easy to use, very simplified, all just the basics that you need. In terms of apps, like Facebook, I'll plug my own company. They do, I think, a really good job of having very unified experiences, and no matter what you're using, it kind of all looks the same. I think Airbnb actually, their whole app experience too, and generally like the design. So there's something called design language. I'm sure you've heard of it as well. That's what designers calls like the standardized experience across the entire product, and making sure that design language is like easy to read, easy to understand, is used everywhere. You can find that in a lot of these companies because their design teams are very well built out to focus on that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I just had a quick question about user research. So in the specific case of login, would, for example, looking at competitor websites or just the biggest websites like Facebook or Twitter and looking at how they do logins, would you say that's like an important part of user research?
Yeah, I think that's a great tool. So I would say it's a supplemental tool because I think everyone's use case is different, right? Like Facebook's use case of people entering versus a government website's login flow versus like a food delivery login flow. They're generally all the same, but they're attracting slightly different people. Maybe in one case, like we talked about, right? Facebook probably doesn't have a guest login, or a government website doesn't probably have a guest login. So they're great in terms of the layout and maybe some of the design language, but I think it's a good supplement to, but it's not a replacement to asking your own users who are coming, whether or not they actually need those features or expect something else. But it's definitely a great way to start, to say, if they are doing it and they're doing it so well, why not? Don't break what's already working.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I noticed that you worked at both Facebook and Shape, but like Facebook is much bigger than Shape, but like I was just wondering what was the main difference that you saw between the two companies of like a bigger company and a startup, either in like the culture or just in terms of like coding and platforms, like just the main difference.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so Shape was a cybersecurity company. It was like 500 people. Facebook is a social media company, 50,000 people is the employee base, so 100x the size. And so I think the major differences are in a company that's larger like Facebook, you'll see design language is very streamlined, very established processes. So things that people before anyone who's joined now has built out to work really well. You have pretty much everything just given to you that you need. Anything that would normally require a startup to build from scratch, somebody's already done for you. So if that's like an internal website for your calendar, if that's an internal website for your meetings, for your like tasks that you have to work on, there's something already built out there. Whereas at Shape, you'll either rely on these third-party companies that'll do it for you, or you'll have to build it yourself because they don't have the same resources, the number of people to dedicate to that. So I think the main differences you'll see are the amount of time you can save with things that are built out for you versus actually knowing what's happening behind the scenes and doing that yourself or relying on another company to do it for you. And startups are usually focused on a very specific mission. So Shape is focused on cybersecurity. Facebook does social media, but it does so many things inside social media. It does e-commerce, it does dating, it does notifications, group events. Shape is focused exclusively on supporting cybersecurity for its customers. So I think you get a very clear difference between the focus versus the breadth of what a company can do.
So I just have a quick follow-up question to that. Where do you think you learn more, like just in general?
I think you learn very different things at both places. I think in a startup you learn faster because out of necessity, there's less people, there's more work to be done, there's more roles that you can take on. At larger companies, they thrive off of the structure because there's always, there's an engineer, and for that engineer, there's a designer, there's a PM, there's a legal team, there's a copy team, and everyone has their designated roles. If it's a small enough company, you are probably going to be the people that's reached out to fill something if it's missing, because there's only so many people that they're there on your team. And so you can learn a lot more that way. But if you want to learn how to build things kind of at scale and like processes that have been built very efficiently, then bigger companies are good for that.
Okay, thank you.
The question I have is, I almost want to push on you a little bit that a lot of this has been, Rachit, based on, did the screen lock up? Based on your user interface, like it's the UI of all these experiences, but the underlying technologies, what are best practices to hone in on platforms or ideals or those kinds of the engineering layer discussions? How are those decisions made these days?
Got it. Yeah, on the engineering level, I think there's some pretty clear ones, whether you're on web, whether you're on mobile, to kind of get the best of the snazziest UI that's out there. And I think you can really build those in many different ways. Some of them are optimized for a little faster experience. Some of them have better animation support. I think at the end of the day, those are more driven by the discussion of like, what is the actual product you want to ship? So I think usually, for example, if something does need more animation, you rely on like this specific JavaScript framework. If something relies on really quick speeds or data coming in, maybe there's some GraphQL backing that like persists the store very well. So I think in general, like those decisions are more of a consequence of knowing what your product's going to be and what a user really expects. And almost the fastest way to prototype, even at Facebook, for example, we have a tool called Origami, which all of our designers use, and external designers use as well, where they'll be doing all of this prototyping of, it's literally a drag and drop coding software. You can drag in what a view looks like. You can drag in an example of an animation and just make a fake app inside your phone or on your website that does everything you need. And they'll always do that first and then take it to a PM and a lead PM before engineer even jumps on whatsoever. And I think the goal behind all that is they want to do it as low barrier as possible. Like the technical discussion should be the last thing, because if we know what we have to solve, then we can figure out technology always. But if we're just figuring out things for the sake of them to build, then, and we're constraining ourselves on the technologies, then we're constraining the problems that we can solve as well.
That's well put. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Can you tell us what's so far, I mean, you have a long journey ahead of building and changing the world, but so far, what has that one thing that you've built that has made you really happy?
Yeah. I can actually speak about this for my work recently because it just got launched publicly like a month ago. Facebook is really pushing into e-commerce and like brands in general and giving brands the opportunity to connect with consumers. And e-commerce particularly because, you know, we're all in COVID, we're all in pandemic. I don't even know when the idea of like window shopping will ever return, to just go to the mall and hang out. But the real story behind all this too is that each of these brands and small businesses, there's a family behind that. There's somebody that needs to run this so that they can support their family and their employees. So as much as, you know, we're thinking about wanting to go shopping for ourselves, it's also supporting the people around us and supporting the businesses around us. So Shops was a really big push for us, where we were giving brands the opportunity to just make a free storefront, like a free page on their Facebook page for anyone. So you don't even have to worry about making a website. You can upload all your products and just do it within the app. And it was a really big kind of milestone for us to move into e-commerce. That was part of kind of the experience for helping do the design and launching it about a month and a half ago. So pretty exciting to see out the door. It's also what I'm currently working on. That is my team now. So it's exciting to be able to keep iterating on that and make sure that we're doing this exact same thing. We're trying to figure out what people need and prioritizing those features first and how we build them so that they're getting out the door as soon as they can for the people who need it as they're using our product.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah. Cool, I think that's everything from me. Thanks so much everyone for jumping in and listening.
Yes, thank you, Rachit, for coming and sharing your expertise. I'm sure the interns took a lot away. I'm sure I took a lot away. And to everyone who was able to come and join and participate and engage and make this a really informative session, thank you very much for coming to today's In Talent Informational.